Hi everyone, this is Satisfying Cactus, Sprint 6 for Cord, sprint planning. I'm going to go over what the blockers are first and then go over the other things we had planned for this sprint. And also I wanted to discuss some of the release planning details. Okay, to start, we only have four blockers, which are these. 2007, which is update default versions for release. I think this is Andy's. Uh,
Yeah, I think I was gonna take that one.
okay.
If somebody else wants it, then that's fine, but um, since I'm usually the one cutting the release anyhow, that seemed like it made sense.
Okay. We have this Onos one, which Suchitra and you have about Onos being stuck. Is this going to be related to one of the? Should this wait to be triaged until after we get the Onos 1.12 in?
Actually, if maybe by the end of the week, I will be able to update a status on this because I had to rebuild the pod due to some other issues, and I just wanted to make sure if we are still having the same issue because we still see the error messages that are mentioned in the bug, but after a while earlier it used to run out of memory. So if it is the same case, then maybe we can decide what we need to do at the end of the week. So I'll update accordingly. I already updated the bug.
Okay.
Maybe I'll get the correct state by the end of
Okay. Thanks, Suchitra. The next one is updating the example service tutorial to reflect dynamic load. This is Scott's. And the last one is Onos doesn't load the net config by uploading Fabric service, which is Andy's. I think you're in the middle
Yes.
of working on.
Yeah, I've already got started on this. I've got some patches that I'm just testing right now.
Okay. We have the release planning document. I think we've all been over this. And is there anything in here that hasn't been translated into Jira that people can realize? I know that the upgrade of Onos, Jonah talked about that earlier in the Scrum. And the rest of these, I think that we got all of these in as sprint planning items. So let's look at things that we have in here. First, I want to see the things that were in Satisfying Cactus Release 5 that didn't make it into 6. This is Gopi. Can you talk about 2252? Are you on?
Yeah, sure. So I'm almost done with this. This is a part of the implementation of the sidecar containers. I had a little bit of trouble with a bug in my code. I just got that working this morning. The next step is to tie this up with VTN. I guess I'll follow that up with another Jira item. I'll close this out in a day or two once I get a path set in and with merged with the code infrastructure. I need to find a place to put it, most likely in the platform install repository, but I'll need to discuss that with you offline.
Okay. And then the other one you had was this one, which is migrating core Helm Docker Compose spec. Gopi, did you want me to take this?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll take.
You could. I think what's going to happen is it's going to be a little bit of ping pong between you and me.
Okay.
So I used Tio's help a lot in this. So we migrated the XOS DB, but we have a bunch of other Docker containers that need to be migrated to Helm charts for Kubernetes, and for that we need some infrastructure pieces. So sure, you can take this, Zach, and once you think that you're done with it, you can hand it over to me so that you can basically tie them up.
Okay.
You can add your notes to that. Yeah.
Alrighty. So these two items, should they be in they're in sprint 6 already. So
Yeah,
Um,
I just put them as Prince 6. Yeah.
okay, so these are all the ones in sprint 6. So actually, this isn't the thing I wanted to look at. There's a I had another filter somewhere in here. Um,
I just wanted to add that depending upon how the meeting goes tomorrow about the deliverable for Google Fiber, we might have a few more tasks that might fall in this sprint. It's not going to impact the 5.2 release itself, but it will. We might have I might create a few new tasks tomorrow after the meeting.
okay. So what I have here is the list of things that were in Satisfying Cactus Sprint 5, but didn't make it to Sprint 6. And I wanted to know, of these, which are ones that we needed to add to Sprint 6. Is Andrea there? If not, I'll get with him offline. He had some T3 things that were in progress, but maybe didn't make it in. Andy had refactor profiles based on design doc, and these other things related to the design of the chord profiles.
Right. So my thinking right now is, since I expect to be pretty busy this sprint between fixing a couple of bugs and documentation, and also trying to support MCord for MWC, that these issues regarding refactoring chord profiles and dynamic loading of profiles, we would probably just push off to the next release planning. We can maybe talk about these issues a little bit more while we're thinking about the next release.
Okay, so I won't move them. The next two are Dimitri's XRAN Update Testing Suite and SPGW app inside ONUS. Do these need to make it into Sprint 6? Do we have anyone from MCord there?
Nope.
Okay, I'll get with I'll bug MCord about that offline. Jono, there's document how to bring up Volta within Chord.
Yeah, this one is almost done.
Okay.
We can call it done. Like we can do tickets for some updates we need to make.
Okay, if you do that, that'd be great. Then if it's closed out, I won't need to move it to 6.
All right.
The next two are Marks. They're eCord related. Internet access from client and VEG in eCord pod. Given the amount of effort being put into eCord right now, I'm going to assume I'm just going to leave them because I don't think they're going to make it into 6, unless Mark is there and can say otherwise. Okay.
He's not here.
Okay. Next, Mateo, adding Docker Compose YAML to the services.
So that is in progress, but I don't think I'll have time to work on that this sprint, since I'll be start with the MWC demo.
Okay. And the update build system to incorporate dynamic onboarding. That's 1259.
The same applies to everything that is assigned to me, but not necessary for the MWC demo.
Okay.
I think 1259 is, my impression is it's more or less done, right, Mateo? I mean, you have kind of the basics there.
Yeah, the 59 is, so the base is done in the sense that we support dynamic onboarding of predefined services. It's still missing the important feature to have a command that's related to something make onboard ESG service.
Okay. Let's move on. Max, I'm assuming, is Max there?
No, Max doesn't work for ONS anymore.
Right. Okay. So then this, can we get this? Should this
You
be?
can assign that to Mark, I guess.
Okay. I'll reassign it to Mark and ask him about it. I'm gonna do that right now, just to. Oh no, not to me. Okay. Alrighty. Sapin, you have some items? Is Sapin on? Yeah, okay.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Sapin.
All right, so support for multiple simultaneous EPCs is done and merged and end-to-end checked. It has a couple of dangling cleanup items that should be considered for future work. Then there's the static checking stuff, which I'm working on right now. It's in this sprint, and I intend to get it done this week.
Okay, that sounds good.
So a question for Sapin, the static checking stuff. I had left a hook in dynamic load for it to be done during the load models call. Do you expect any of the static checking will be able to do it then, generate errors and return them at that time, and is that something we should try to do for release?
I'm not sure. As I said, there's there are 3 parts or 4 parts to this static checking. The last part actually involves feeding in the rules that we'd decided upon, that we've got listed in the static checking design document. We might need a bit of to and fro there, trying to figure out what the right rules should be and how they should be parameterized. So it might cut it a bit close, but we can try. We can take this offline.
Sure.
Okay, the next items are mine. The setting up SonarQube is dependent on getting new Jenkins set up, and that looks like it's coming along. It's sort of disconnected from the release, like most things that are testing infrastructure based. So that may or may not get done.
Right, you're unlocked on that.
Yeah. Okay. And the image builder, I'm thinking 2185 is going to get put off, like Andy's and and Mateo's other dynamic onboarding things. We need to rethink a little bit about how it identifies repos and Docker images that are being built. 717 is probably going to get in. It may or may not get in with auth, but is probably going to happen during this release to Super Kubernetes. It's probably not going to be in the default path. It's probably going to be only on the Kubernetes path, and therefore in the alpha or beta state that we ship Kubernetes support in release 5. And then 1650 and 1478 are still have some outstanding tasks because they to make the vagrant provisioning more to make the network config during vagrant provisioning not happen during vagrant provisioning. Okay, and I'm assuming then this ONOS app configuration is also in the same case as the other eCord items. So I think that's it. It looks like most of these things are going to stay undone, except for the ones that we've mentioned. Alrighty, so let's switch back over to the Cord board. Go through here. Deployments and build automation. Luca, can you talk about the Volta drivers?
Yes. So that's already in progress. It's almost finished, actually. That's my hope. So as a result of this, we will have a job in Jenkins that automatically builds all the edge core drivers the Volta drivers will produce a dev package. So installing Volta should be, well, at least on the OLT should be easier than if it gets installed. And then I can talk about the others. So we'll create from today another job to automatically configure VSG, create users and configure the VSG. We have to deploy the software I mentioned below, via both Open Networking Linux and the dev package we will produce in Jenkins as one of the deployments we have. And then same is for Volta, that will be mainly driven by John, probably to speed up the process, but I'd like to go through the documentation and help there. It might be a good way to check the documentation, but there will be some other work to do it, to integrate it manually with Cord, I guess. And then we have a new service provider coming in, at least as a collaborator. I will have a kickoff meeting tonight called Reliance GIO. I don't know how to pronounce it. GIO. Yeah, and they want to deploy very, very, very soon Arcord as well. So I will engage in the discussion and help them with the deployment.
Okay, thanks, Luca. Jonah?
Yeah, that's what Luca mentioned. I guess I'll be working with Luca to help him deploy Volta there.
Okay. Moving on, document satisfying Cactus. So I had the first two items. One is right now we don't have a security list or any security response policy, and that has been brought up by a couple of people, especially through QA. So I want to get that rolling. It was discussed at the last TST. And then I wanted to document how to create a scenario. This was a request from Larry to go over that process. And then the next two are Scott's.
Yeah, so the first one is the example service tutorial. I've been pushing that to the end just to make sure it reflects everything that has changed this release. I think it's probably time to sit down and do it because I don't know that we're getting any more build system changes that will be showing up at this point. If I'm wrong about that, let me know and I will postpone it further. But I think I'm ready to start on that one. The other one, Matteo pointed out that the example service tutorial is great, but it's really long to run through it to just find the little tidbit that you're looking for. So maybe writing a service and synchronizer reference guide would be nice to have for 5.0 that would break things out in an easier to manage, less tutorial and more reference-like manner. So that's also on the documentation list.
I think the last one's Sapan.
Yeah, I'm going to be documenting as much stuff as I can. Going to be in Menlo Park next week and talking to people, and hopefully one of the things that'll come out of that is lots of documentation.
Okay, thanks, Sapan. Dynamic loading and service provisioning. These are
say again, Zach.
These are almost all yours, Scott. I think.
Yeah. I've got a whole list of stuff. So migrate core models from static to dynamic load. That's sort of the one I'm working on. I did add this new one down here near the bottom, 2648, to eliminate legacy attics. It's kind of a prerequisite for 2477. That's to get the attics cleaned up in a manageable manner before we try to dynamic load them. So that pushed this 2477 back just a little bit. Moving on with the other, Tosca container should restart when models change. That's low priority, only done if other things get done. Eliminating obsolete services, that one is probably close to done. I just need to give it one more look to make sure there's no obsolete services to get rid of. Eliminating obsolete onboarding recipes. So all of our services still have an service name -onboard.yaml file in them. I'm not sure, but it may be possible just to delete those at this point. So I was going to try to do that. And then finally, there's template service. I kind of forgot about template service because it wasn't, it's not an RCord service. It's kind of something else. But I think it's important to get that done for release so that service has been moved to dynamic load as well. So that's probably an hour or two of work at the most. That's it.
So, when are we thinking about declaring feature freeze?
So
I was
go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say I was hoping for end of the week, but if it needs to be earlier, I can adjust.
Okay, so
and then something would go in the next release.
Okay, so the portion of the work here, so some of it looks just like cleanup, but the portion that you consider adding new stuff, that can probably be wrapped up by the end of this week.
I hope so. The big one at risk is probably migrating core models from static to dynamic load. If that one turns out to continue to run into other things that pop up that need to be done as prerequisites, it would get pushed off to next release. I don't think that's the end of the world. It just means we have the core model statically loaded for a while longer.
Okay, I would also say that if there are any of the 5.0 blockers, we should get those all dealt with before we hit feature freeze. And so I think that because one of those involves debugging things with ONOS, we need to wait until we get the ONOS upgrade, and then we need to verify that those errors are resolved. So those are the only other things, but I think end of the week is a good goal. Okay, moving on. There's nothing from eCord. Expanding QA coverage. Suchitra, do you have comments on these?
Right. So the first one is we have new pods from Flex Lab, so we are trying to create them for the community where they want to contribute to ONF. There are some QA groups from India and also here, so we would want to access these. So I'm trying to set up that with the help of Sid. And another one is validating the end-to-end data plane connectivity. We already have some tests, so we plan to add them as part of Jenkins job to verify using RCord. There are a few things which are not working currently. Kailash is working on that. And the other one is for the SOAP test. We had some issues last sprint, so this story has been carried from the last sprint to here. And there is one more test that I still need to write on it and then validate it again on FlexPod. So that is all we have. I think we might add more during the middle of the week, probably, based on how we proceed. So that's all for us from QA.
Okay, thanks, Suchitra. Fabric features and improvements. First is the error that we talked about earlier. Is Pierre or Andrea there? If not, they have a considerable amount of work that they're trying to get done in this. I think a few of these are already been done, but or are in progress. So let's.
Yeah, just send me an email with a short summary of what they are. I can read through that if you want, but I think they are pretty descriptive.
Could you repeat that? Pretty what, Matteo?
Yeah, that Pierre sent me a short summary of his stories. If you want, I can read through that.
Yeah, let's do that.
So called 2534, MCAS Central is done, does not handle the write down, it's waiting for review. 2483, MCAS traffic does not reach all the things, so it's waiting for review too. as well as 2485, the late multiple sync does not clearly properly deploy. From the previous print, there is still 2480 dual link support for MCAS that is waiting for review. While the new story that PR is going to work on is 2634, fixed verify operation in FTPA pipeliner, and 2607 MCAS bucket correction.
Okay, it sounds like he's pretty on top of it, so that sounds good. I'll follow up with Andre on his topics.
Yeah, topic source for MCAS.
Okay, let's move on to MCord. For MCord, we have it looks like we have a bunch of things from the last sprint. Do we? And since MCord's the people who are taking care of most of the MCord work aren't here, Andy, do you want to talk about this? About your items, at least?
Sure, yeah. So my items are adding another service graph for another EPC that we're going to be demoing at MWC, and testing both service graphs together, just running some traffic through and making sure that things seem to be working. Those are the top two, and then the core 2626 is making sure that we have a procedure for powering down the pod and then bringing it back up at MWC and getting everything working. So we should, at one point we had a procedure for doing this, and so hopefully it's just a matter of verifying that it still works. Hopefully that won't take, maybe I'll dial that down. I don't think that's a 5 in terms of points. I'll edit that. The other things that Ping Ping and Wuzhong have here are, I'm pretty sure, just testing the MWC setup and just trying to make sure that things look reasonable.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Matteo, did you have any comment on these last two?
Yeah, so 2550, it will be my main effort to write a program service for IFS. It shows 0 story points because there are a bunch of tasks and the estimate is in there. And then it will need to go together with a GUI extension for the demos to nicely display the connectivity between the different elements of the MCord lighting.
Okay, that sounds good. Let's move on to maintenance. The only item we have is Andy's update the default version for the release. So, as with most things in maintenance, it just accumulates things through the sprint.
Right.
Nothing in offline limited access install. Jonah has one item for RCord.
Yeah, I need to make a couple of changes to, there was some new work done in the last couple of weeks about how to run Volta, and also some new patches that have come in which simplify our life a little bit. So I just need to go through and test them and update the documentation we have accordingly.
Okay, that sounds good. Refactor build deploy. Core 2162 is collecting more diagnostic information during the Jenkins builds. This was, we right now, this is a really short one, but I want to go through some of the jobs and add items to pull out the diag folder and a few other things, so we can more easily tell what's wrong when Jenkins fails. Luca, you had 2658.
Yeah, it's an easy one, but I want to make it happen this week before the release. This is to distinguish between different type of this will mainly enable us to correctly provision the OLT.
Okay, thanks, Luca.
Yeah.
Nothing in unit testing framework, nothing in upgrade to Xenial. Cleanup. So I have a cleanup, I had a bunch of cleanup items because if we're going to do a release, we're going to be generating a bunch of documentation. Some of this is fixing warnings, and then there's some lint tools that exist for either our documentation, the markdown files and documentation, or for the YAML markup files that we have in platform install and in the services and Tosca and those sorts of things. So I'm working on getting some tooling going for that because this isn't, most of this is fairly minor changes like spacing and other stuff that's that I think is going to be fairly benign when we make the changes. I am also looking for things to go through and lint our Python code and also do some other just cleanup like removing old and unused files. I have a full document about that. I shared it in the design channel. I'd kind of like to do this before we get to 6.0 because then if we do it right when we start 6.0, we're going to have to, if we do have to backport anything, the diffs won't match. So that's why I'd kind of like to do it now rather than then. But that's open to more discussion. And other than that, do we have anything in the Kubernetes? Okay. So Kubernetes, create a Kubernetes deployment within Cord. 2521 is still, I'm still working on trying to get the containers that are brought up by the Cord build system to work on macOS. This is so that we can run a local copy of a Kubernetes cluster that's set up in our way. I'm running into some issues with network setup that I haven't managed to resolve yet. For now, it's running correctly on a Linux machine. It's running correctly in Cloud Lab. I'd like to still get this going, but it might involve making a different scenario. And 2500, I think that's Gopi's, but it's set up by Docker registry accessible but from Kubernetes. I think that's going to go along with the other Cord 717 Docker SSL.
So this can be a pretty simple implementation. I can do this for the current sprint 6.
Okay. The next one, deploy XOS on NOS using Helm charts. 2608 is automate installation of Helm. This is basically add things, targets to platform install to install Helm and then bring up and then make Helm charts specific to the XOS scenario and profile. This is what I'm currently working on. So hopefully I'll have this done sometime during the week. And then 2501, I think, is Gopi's migrate the XOS Core Docker Compose to Kubernetes Helm. I think we're part of the way through this. Is that right, Gopi?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So I guess the thing in critical path right now is using the image builder to build the images and generate the config files at the same time. That can be used to load the files in the XOS core that we have defined in the compose file right now. Once we have that, the other pieces like the ONOS control plane and the specific containers for each profile, RCOD, MCOD, they can be worked on in parallel. But right now, I think it's the image builder work that needs to be done.
Okay, thanks, Gopi. The rest of
I do have a question. So in the previous thing, 2608, automate installation of Helm. If you're talking about installation of installing the Helm server in Kubernetes, that's already done.
no, I'm talking about automating installing. It's probably installation and configure of Helm and configuring the Helm charts per the profile.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, which is slightly different than installing and then maybe installing the Helm binary on the local system versus and then before you actually connect it to the Kubernetes that's been deployed.
Yeah, so that probably should be broken up into smaller pieces, because if it's bringing in the profiles, it's going to be a pretty large task, almost an epic. So I guess we can take it offline.
Yeah. Okay.
And we can break it up into smaller pieces.
Okay, let's moving on. 2552. This is the one that Gopi already discussed about an app to watch the pod for Kubernetes pods and Informs Onos. The rest of these we haven't started on. Issues without epics. Sapin, a basic static checker for Xproto. Do we still have Sapin?
Oh no, he had to drop off.
Yeah, he had to drop off. Okay. Yeah, I think he talked about both of these at Scrum earlier. So he's got the static checker mostly working, and multi-struct logging needs to update, I think, the version, because he got upstream a patch applied that lets that work. Then there's 2461, which is the Onos doesn't load netconfig, which I think Andy is almost done with. And then Matteo, can you talk about 2647?
Yeah, so this is basically a small bug that I found this morning. When we are using the underscore decal extension for Xproto, the event that gets sent through WebSocket to notify the GUI about the deletion of a model still carry the underscore decal suffix on the model name, so the GUI doesn't know how to handle that. It's a really small fix.
Okay, thanks, Matteo. I want to just look at look at sort of the breakdown of this. So it looks like most of the work is going on either directly in XOS or in MCord, and some in the build system. And yeah, this is just the same thing, but a graph. In terms of work and people, it looks like Matteo, you happen to have a lot on your plate. This is absolute numbers. This isn't of tickets, not points. So you have a lot of things going on, and so does Sapin and Scott to some extent. Most of mine are in progress and partially done, but it looks like we're in pretty. We have 82 items in this, which is less than the 100 plus that we had last time. So I think we're in pretty good shape there. Overall,
I divided my stories in really small pieces, so most of them are really small tasks.
okay, that's good. Let's see here. Where was I? So there are 172 points in this sprint. That's a little bit higher than average, but I think a lot of things are in progress and close to being done. So we'll see how it goes. I'm going to leave the sprint open probably until about 5 o'clock tonight. If anyone wants to add stuff before then, please do. I'd prefer not to have a lot of things enter the sprint after the fact, unless they're maintenance or bug related. The general goal, I think, is to have us cut a release or an RC by either the end of the week or beginning of next week, and then I'd like to see if we could get the release totally out by the 15th or 16th. It's actually the 16th is the last day of the sprint. We have a full 3 weeks. There aren't any holidays, so that should be in our favor too. Does anyone else have any other comments on sprint planning or just in general about how the release is going? Okay, then. I'm going to call the meeting, and thanks all for taking taking part in this, and let's get this done.
Cheers, guys.
All right.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye.